Hello there all my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this Tree of Life wirework bracelet. Now I made two different versions here just to show you some different variations you can do. But on both of them we have that Tree of Life in the middle that's going to sit lovely on the wrist and be the main feature. And then I added the beads along the sides of the bracelet which really adds some interest to it. And then I chose to use silver and copper wire in my bracelets to really make the weaving stand out, but of course you can mix your materials however you want to. So if you want to learn how to make your own Tree of Life bracelet, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. First of all here I'm using 3 different gauges of regular round wire. The first one here is a 1mm and that's a silver coated one that I'm using, and this is going to be the base wire. The next one is a 0.4mm which is copper, and this is going to be used as the main weaving wire. And finally I have a 0.25 here, also copper, and this is going to be used to make the tree. Then as for the beads that we're going to be adding in, I have 2 different ones here. First of all I have 6mm rounds. These specific ones are faceted purple banded agate gemstone beads, and they're going to be added along the sides of the bracelet. Then the other beads I'm using are these tiny 2mm faceted green gemstone rounds, and these are going to be creating the tree. Then to finish off the bracelet I'm going to be using this Lost or Cold clasp and extended chain along with some jump rings, but you could also choose to make your own clasp. That's completely up to you. Now I'm going to have the material list here and links as well in the description box down below the video so you can check that out. Otherwise let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. Then we'll need some lengths of our wire, and first of all here I have 8 lengths of my 1mm which is the base wire, about 35 centimeters each. And then we need 2 separate lengths of the 0.4mm wire which is the weaving wire, about 3.5 meters each. Now there's quite a bit, but we are going to be doing a fair bit of weaving. So now we have our wires cut ready. What we're going to start with is 4 lengths of the base wires and 1 length of the weaving wire there, and we're going to start working these together. So we're going to weave this weaving wire around these base wires and get into the pattern straight away. Now I'm just going to have all my base wires laying next to me here so they're handy and ready for when I need them. I'm going to start with 1 and then I take my weaving wire as well. So first of all I need to attach this weaving wire to the base wire. I'm going to work towards one end of the base wire. What I like to do is go in about 7 centimeters or so, because we need to use some of these lengths to finish off the bracelet with at the end. And I like to leave a short tail on my weaving wire as well, just to have something to hold on to. Then what I'm going to do is put the weaving wire on top of the base wire, and then that short tail pointing away from me, and then I have the long tail of my weaving wire that I'm going to be weaving with. So I'm going to wrap this weaving wire around the base wire. So it's now coiled around like that and it's fastened. And I want to do this just a few times just to make sure it's fastened nicely. Now obviously you can still move up and down the base wire, but that's why I like to have this little length on the weaving wire that I can kind of hold on to. So I'm wrapping it around 4 to 5 times or so. Just something like that. And you can always as well have some chain nose pliers handy, which can help squeeze your wraps tight together. Make it nice and even. And then when you start bringing in the other base wires, so this was the first one, then I'm going to take the next one and place that above that first one. So they lay like this, and again just about the same length there. Then I take my weaving wire, it's now coming over the top of that bottom one and then down, and I'm going to go behind the base wires now, and I'm going to go behind both of them. So like that, make sure to push it down nice and tight. Then as it's coming back over the top there, I'm going to bring it over the top of both of the base wires and then down towards the bottom again, still making sure that the wraps are laying flat next to the other ones so we don't have any overlapping ones. And then we have the weaving wire naturally coming down underneath these base wires again. Now straight away I'm going to take another base wire, again push it so it's about the same length that we have there. Then we need to go underneath all of these 3, and as we're bringing it over the top now and coming down towards the bottom again, I'm not going to go all the way underneath that bottom one. I'm going to go between the 2 bottom ones and bring the wire down between them. So I'm technically going over the top of the top 2 base wires and then push that down. Again, you can use your nails, you can also use your pliers a little bit, but obviously gently so you don't want to diameter wire here. And then again, the weaving wire is naturally coming upwards behind those two wires now. And then we need to bring in the final base wire in this group that we're just working with right now. That's the new top one. And that, I need to bring my weaving wire, right now obviously it's still loose, I'm bringing my weaving wire up between those two top ones. And then I wrap around that top one by itself, go over that, and then down behind. Just like that. So that's basically wrapped by itself right now. And then my weaving wire is naturally coming down behind all the base wires here. So what I'm going to do is bring it up between the bottom two wires, because this is kind of the point we've reached now. So now we worked our way upwards, now we need to work our way downwards on the other side again. And just keep hold of everything best you can. It's always the most fiddly at the beginning because obviously the base wires are loose, but it's coming up between those two bottom ones. Then we need to go over the top of the two middle wires. So I need to come down between the top two and push that wrap all the way down using your finger or your pliers. And then your weaving wire comes down behind the wires again, all the way down below the bottom one, over the top of the bottom two, which means I'm going to then bring it down right in the middle of them all. Again, push that wrap nice and tight. And now what I'm going to do is bring this up between the bottom two. And again, use that to push the wraps close together. And also, you can use your pliers if you need to help push it together and flatten out your base wires as well. And then we just need to wrap around this bottom one. So I'm going to be doing that once, twice, 3 times, 4, and a 5th one. So like that. So we have basically a little flourish right there, so that little almost tulip. And we can just make sure everything looks nice, flatten your base wires out. You can help push your wraps nice and close together. If you need to straighten anything up, do that now, obviously gently. Try and push the bottom wraps nice and close together so you don't have too much of the base wire showing through. So this is how we started out the weave. So you can see the weaving wire is now attached, and also this group of base wires have now been put together. And after I then made those 5 single wraps there on the bottom one, we need to start the next one. And it's exactly the same way, except we already have all the wires attached, so we obviously don't need to attach them as we just did before. So we just need to start by coming, the weaving wire is going down behind the base wires. You can separate your wires out a little bit. So behind the bottom 2 base wires, that means we're coming up between the 2 middle ones to come down over the top of the 2 bottom base wires, behind your base wires again, up between the top 2, push that down. Now we need to come over the top of the middle 2 base wires. So we're coming down between that and bottom 2. Just do that single wrap. Work our way towards the top, where we need to come up between the top 2 base wires to be able to then do that single wrap around the top one. Just like that. Come down behind. So that's kind of the tip of it. So we need to make the other side. So I come up between bottom 2, go over the top of the 2 middle wires, make sure to push this nice and tight, all the way down behind the bottom wire there to go over the top of the bottom 2 and kind of finish this little flourish off. Push it nice and tight together, and then just remember to come up between the bottom 2 so we can then do the single wraps around this bottom wire 5 times, just like before. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one. So I'm just using these 5 single wraps to kind of space out these little flourishes, or the little tulips, you could call them. And it looks a little something like that. And again, just a little tip. You can use your pliers along the way. I do recommend that as you go. Gently, of course, like I said, to not damage the wire if you can help it. To push your wraps together, and also to help flatten out your base wires nicely, so it all becomes nice and even. So there we go. So you just want to keep doing this until we reach the point where we then need to add in our first bead. So I've now made 3 of my little tulips there. I'm going to start making the 4th one. So just do that in the exact same way. So I'm doing my first wrap, working my way up the one side here until I get to the point of it, because this is then the one where I want to stop and add in my bead. So I've done my double wraps, and then I get to that top base wire where I need to wrap that by itself, and I bring that just around that top base wire, and then now I stop, because like I said, I want to add a bead in here. But before we can do that, we need to also use all the other wires and basically make that section as well in the exact same way as this, except for the fact that it needs to be mirrored. So that means it's the same technique, but we're just starting in a mirrored image. So I'll put the other section that I just did to the side for now, and then to do it mirrored, like I said, it's the same technique, but basically I'm going to be using opposite hands. So it's up to you how you do it. This is just what I find works for me. Again, you take towards one end of your weaving wire, place it towards one end of your base wire, again about the same length in, and then over the top of it, and you just want to start doing the same weave. First of all, attach it here. So wrap it around, same amount of times. And then as you do that, have that little tail there to hold on to. We then, first of all, the first time we need to make that little flourish or tulip is when we need to add in the other base wires. So I'm just first of all going to push my wraps close together, and then we can add these in one at a time. So take the next one, make sure they're about even there, and this is where we then get into the same weave. So we need to come behind both of them to go over the top of both of them, then come up towards the top again, bring in the next one about the same length, and then bring your weaving wire down over the top of the top 2. So we need to go down between the bottom 2 base wires there, and push your wraps together, and then bring the weaving wire upwards, and this is where we need to bring in the last base wire, and just hold on to that, and then wrap around that by itself by first of all coming up between them top 2, to then just go around that with a single wrap. Come down behind again, and you can always just help along the way, flatten things out. And then we need to come up between the bottom 2 to be able to go over the top of the middle 2 wires there. So these 2 with the weaving wire to mirror the other side that we just did first. Come all the way down behind all of them, go over the top of the bottom 2 to then come straight away up between the bottom 2 that we just went over the top of. Push it all down so you can see your wraps get nice and tight, and then this is where we just do the individual wraps along the bottom one to basically create the spacing to make the next flourish. And this is just how you do it, and you want to make the same amount here, get to that same point where we make the 4th one, but stop at the point. So I've now done both of them and got them to the same point. So on the 4th little flourish at the very tip of it, that's where I finished so far with this weaving wire, the long length. And you can see they're going to be laying like this against each other. So this is why we need to do them mirrored from each other, so it kind of frames in the piece. And it's now here that we need to start adding in our beads. So first of all, what I have is one of my 6mm rounds. So what we need to do is I'm just going to take one length of my weaving wires at a time and put my bead onto that. And then just let it slide all the way down the wire. So pull it through gently. So it comes down the wire here. And then that sits there. Then I'm going to take the weaving wire from the opposite, the other section that we did, and also just find the end first of all, to just get to that. Obviously we're working with long lengths right now. They will obviously get shorter as we use more and more of the wire, but then we need to take that end and put it through the same bead, but in the opposite direction. And then just hold on to that nicely. Pull the wire through gently so we don't strip it. And also make sure as you pull it through to avoid any kinks. So if you have little loops on your wire here, undo them before you then keep pulling it through the bead, because then that will damage the wire. So just undo your kink and then pull through gently. And then when you have it all the way down here, we can then bring the weaving wires here to the opposite sides of where they're coming from, because they're now crossing inside of this bead. And you can see as you pull them, it's going to pull the two sections close together. And the beads are going to sit right there in between them. So this is the point that we're at now. You see, this is how we're going to continue adding in the beads, but obviously we have to also keep weaving the section as we do that. So I've now picked up a piece again here, and what you just want to make sure to do as well is that you pick it up in the right direction, because what you'll find is with this weave, it does have a front and a back, as it looks slightly different. So you want to make sure this is the front that's pointing upwards, and then the back, which you'll be able to tell when you see it closely, is pointing downwards here, just so we kind of have control over it. Now the weaving wires here right now are going over the top of the front of the weave there. So what I actually want to do is bring them down just through the middle where they're coming out from the bead, because we just need to get them to come behind all the base wires like that. And we can also just keep pulling tight through, because they're coming over the base wire as they're going through the beads to begin with, the bead rather. So now to secure it in place nicely, I'm going to make sure they come behind the base wires as they're exiting the bead again. And now we have them in position to basically continue our weaving. So remember, we finished previously where we weaved right kind of in the middle of a little flourish there at the point. So we basically just need to pick that back up. Now the first, especially the first one here where we add the first bead, you can see it's still wobbly, so that's kind of the most fiddly part. Once you add in a couple of beads, it gets a lot more sturdy and easy to handle. But you just want to make sure you pull these weaving wires tight so we don't have a gap like that, for instance. Make sure that bead sits as close to the base wires as possible. But otherwise we just want to pick back up the same weave, which means do one side at a time. I'm going to come, it's coming behind the base wires to come up between the bottom two, because like I said, we need to finish this little flourish or tulip off. Now go over the top of the two middle ones and down behind them all to come over the top of the bottom two. You can see it's the exact same weave and come straight away up between the bottom two as well, to then be able to wrap around that bottom one. The 5 times the same as the other ones to get that spacing. Just do them, and then what I like to do is, before doing the full section for the next bead, is I do like to get this fastened first on the other side as well, just to make it a little bit less fiddly, and so it's in place and I know it's not going to move around too much. So I just flip it around to the other side, and this weaving wire, make sure it's pulled tight, comes down behind, and finish off this section in the exact same way. So basically adding in those beads as we're doing the weave becomes as seamless as possible. That's kind of the goal with this, almost as if they're just kind of floating in between the two sides of the weave sections. So you can see, same way as the other one, as the other side, just mirrored. In this case here I'm working with opposite hands, and then around the bottom one by itself with those same amount of times. And that's now how you've added in your very first bead. You can see already that's now holding together, but obviously it's moving around. Once you add another 1 or 2 beads, it's going to be a lot easier to hold on to. But all you want to do now is continue like this. So what you want to do is continue your weave in this exact same way. And after this section that I just did, where I added the bead in, again, just remember as well to keep straightening your wires out, tightening everything up, because you also want to make sure that it's kind of level with each other all the way along. Also like going in and kind of putting my pliers between the little flourishes, flattening them out. But then I just did a flourish on either side to add in the bead. Then I need to move on and do another flourish or tulip, a full one on either side, and then I start the next one, which is then the one I need to add in the next bead. So that means you just do one full flourish or tulip in between each time you add a bead, and every time you add a bead you just do it in the exact same way as I just showed you here. And you basically want to keep doing this until you have the length you need for the one side of the bracelet, until we reach that middle part with the tree. So I've now added in all the beads here that I want on this side of the bracelet, and I reached that midpoint, and I've ended up adding in 9 of my beads. So like I said, we need this midpoint now, so we're going to continue doing this weaving pattern. We're just not going to add beads in. So what we're going to be doing is just work on one side at a time, pick back up your weaving wire there. You literally just want to continue that same pattern as I showed you. So do your little tulips, and with the same spacing as well. Do that on one side, and then once you've done the amount of little flourishes or tulips on here, move over to the other side and do the same thing. Now what I've ended up with, I like to do is have 11 of these little flourishes going along, and then I'll stop, and like I said, go to the other side and do the same on that side as well, and then we'll need to shape it. So now I made the weave on both sides here, we need to shape them. So just do one side at a time, and we need to, I keep hold of where my beads end there. I need to then kind of push it away from the other side, first of all. And you can just do that with both of them, and kind of try and get them symmetrical to each other. Just push them open first of all. And then all I want to do is start putting a curve into this length of weave that we've just done. So it comes back down, and the other side becomes even, equivalent to that first side here. So just take your time, make sure it stays flat, so your wires there stay flat next to each other. And we'll just bring a curve into it. Just nice and gently. And obviously the other side as well. You can kind of do them a bit at a time to make sure they're as symmetrical as possible. And of course here at the end, when they start to overlap, we need to then bring these lengths of the base wires back out. So also make sure that your weave is constantly pushed close together, so you can keep pushing it down and holding on to your base wires there. But then I want to start bringing this back out to come straight out again, because we need to also make the other side equivalent to that one. So we need to bring our base wires back out. So something a bit like that. Same with the other side. Bring it straight back out, and you can just then take a little bit of time and adjust anything you need to make sure you're completely happy with this shape, and it's as even and symmetrical as possible. Once we then have this little kind of circular shape in place in the middle and you're happy with it, and I've also got my base wires there kind of going straight back out to the side, then we can literally pick back up our weaving wires and also get our beads ready again, because now we need to basically replicate the very first section there. So you just start with your weaving wires, and then the very next little flourish or tulip that you're going to do is where you want to add in your bead. So that's going to sit right there, and then otherwise you just continue adding the same amount of beads as we did on this first side here, and then we have the complete length. So now I've done the full length of my bracelet, and now that we're done with the weaving wires here, we need to get rid of the excess of them. And also before we do that, just make sure that you push your weave close together as you go, so there's not any gaps here, and also so they become even on the ends. But then to get rid of them, all I want to do is I'm just going to flip it around to the back, and it's the same on all of them, so I'm just going to show you on one here. Flip it around and then continue the wrap in the direction that it's going, as if you're going to do another wrap, but instead of then weaving between the wires, I'm going to take my flush cutters, going close to where the wire ends. Just cut off the excess, and then you're going to find there's just a little tiny tail left. You can feel it if you run over it with your finger. Then I'm going to take some chain nose pliers or flat nose and squeeze that in nice and flat, and then basically ideally it should end up actually settling in between those two base wires, so get tucked nicely out of the way so it's not going to catch or scratch on anything. So that's finished off that weaving wire, and just do the same with the other one and obviously on the other end as well. Once we then get rid of all the weaving wires here, we're just going to finish off the ends. So I'm just going to show you on the one side. Now, like I said, we got rid of the weaving wires, so we have the weave itself ends with these three little flourishes. So what I'm going to do is grab hold of where that last bead is, and then I'm going to start bringing the two groups of wires together here towards each other. Now I'm going to bring one underneath and the other one over, crossing over each other like this, and basically get a bit of a crossover point where those weaves end. So it's going to look a little something like that. You can see it gives it a nice finish to the end of the bracelet as well. So make sure to make it as symmetrical as possible. And then we need to start finishing off the base wires here. So first of all, we need to pick one out that we then be able to make a loop with, and that's going to be the inner one from the group at the back here. So I'm going to just separate that one out, and then just get some chain nose pliers, put them right at the base there where the other group crosses over, and then I want to put a bit of an angle in, so end up getting this wire to basically go straight out from that midpoint or something like that, because then we're going to use that to make the loop like I said. So I'm just going to leave that there for now. And then first of all, I'm going to take the group here on top, so the one that has 4 wires still. We need to bring all of these at the same time towards the back. So I like to put my fingers and hold onto this crossover point so my wires don't move around too much. And then gently start bringing them around the back here. Try and avoid any of the other wires moving around too much like I said. And then bring them to the back, and we want to kind of push them down to get them somewhat nice and as flat as possible really against the other wires. Something a bit like that. While we still have this wire that we're bent going straight out, so we don't want that to move too much either. So there we go, and just have them coming out basically right underneath themselves, or something like that. If you need to straighten them out a little bit, you can. There we go. And then I need to cut off the excess. So I'm going to take some strong flush cutters here because it's some thick wire that we're using. And we need to cut off the excess, but leave a bit of a tail on them after where these other wires are. So I'm not going to cut up against them. I'm going to leave a millimeter or two after. You can just cut one wire at a time. Just make sure you put your pliers in the correct place. And just obviously these wires here, you don't want to take the layer below. And go all the way across, and I just cut one wire, and I like to then use that to kind of guide with the other ones. So I put the back of my pliers against it, so I know that's kind of the guide for the next one. So it's more or less straight across. Until we've cut all 4 down and get rid of that excess. And then you can see we have these short little ends. So now what we need to do is get some chain nose pliers, because I then want to use them and grab onto the very end that's left there of all of the wires. And then as I got that, I want to do a little flick with my wrist there on the pliers and bend them in towards the back of the weaving there. Try and make sure you get all of them. The last 2 missing, but you could come in from the other side as well. You can get your pliers in there to make sure they're bent inwards, so we don't have these ends sticking against our skin or anything, catching or scratching. Then I'm going to use, you can also use, I'm going to take some flat nose pliers here and just help squeeze them tighter down So they basically almost hug around the other wires going out to this side here. And that also secures it in place while finishing off the ends. And then make sure you run your fingers over it there so you can't feel any scratchy ends sticking out. We then have the other 3 wires left. They're going the opposite direction. Before I'm going to tackle this single one we're going to make the loop with. So I want to finish them off first. So what I'm going to do is flip it around to the back where I cut off the excess wire and made those short ends. I'm going to take these 3 at the same time, hold on to everything as best I can, and then bend them around the back. So over the top of these short ends. So I'm staying on the back here. Again, just down in the same direction as where they're coming from. So you can see they're bending over like that. And then same principle. I'm going to take my flush cutters, cut off the excess so I leave a short little end. Something a bit like this here with a few millimeters. Get rid of the excess. Take my chain nose pliers first of all, grab onto the very ends, flick them inwards down towards the other section down here, and then we just want to squish it flat so there's not too much air between our wires. And again, that makes sure the ends are kind of going inwards so they shouldn't catch or scratch on anything. Make sure to feel it with your fingers. And when you've done that, you've finished off most of these base wires, and minus obviously this last one. We're just going to make a wrap loop with that. So again, I grab my chain nose pliers and then place them on my wire a little bit up from where the bend is. So I'll leave a bit of space there. I like to hold my bracelet to the side like this, and then I need to put a curve, well not a curve, an angle rather, into this wire. So I bend it away from myself. You can see you get this angle and going to the side of the bracelet. Then I like to take my 6-step bell making pliers just so I know what size loop I'm going to get. You can also use round nose pliers. I'm going to place that right above that angle and then bring this wire all the way around the pliers so we get a complete circle with something like this. Take my chain nose again, or flat nose, hold on to the circle here so it keeps its shape, and then I take this tail that's left and we need to wrap that around now in this little area where we left the wire, and that's then going to be our wrap loop. So you can see I'm filling in this space that we left, wrapping nice and neatly underneath each other, wraps close to each other here. And then as I have no more space to wrap, I'm going to then take some flush cutters again, cut off the excess, get rid of that, and then just make sure always when you cut off like that, you're going to have the little end sticking out. You want to make sure to always get rid of that. So I'm going to hold on to it and then take my chain nose or flat nose and squeeze that down. Because of course we don't want that irritating skin or clothes or anything. And hide that away. And that's basically our wrap loop here, and then we can use this to attach whatever kind of findings that we want to. And then of course you just want to flip your bracelet around and do the exact same thing, finish this end off in the same way. So now I've finished off both ends here. So you have my wrap loops, they're ready to go. Then I'm going to get to the middle here because now I want to make the tree. And I'm going to do that by using 5 lengths of my 0.25mm wire here, about 25 centimeters each. So I've cut them all ready, and these are going to be attached now so we can start making the tree. So I've got my bracelet ready here, and obviously I'm going to add the wires to this midpoint. And what we're going to do is use the inner base wire where the points come out at. So I'm going to take just one of my little weaving wires that I cut ready at a time. And then we need to decide where we want the branches to kind of go. So I'm just going to start in the middle, and I'm going to go down, just going to go down from the front here between the inner and the next inner one. So down between them. Then I'm just going to flip it to the back and then move over. I'm going to skip, in this case I'm just skipping 2 points and coming down again between those 2 inner base wires. and then pulling that back to the front. And now we just need to kind of measure these tails so they become somewhat even. And bring them out like this. You can pull slightly on one and then on the other until you're pretty happy with it. And then I'm happy with how this is sitting. So this is kind of one wire attached now. Then I'm going to take another one. And this is literally just going how you feel you want it to look. So however close or how far apart you want the branches, that's completely up to you. Then I take the next one. And then what I'm going to do is go down from the front again. Always doing that between those two base wires, the same ones all the way around. I'm going to skip one of the points in this case. Go down through the next gap. And then just go behind on the back here. See where the wire's coming out. Behind one point in this case, come out towards the front again. Also just to make it not too symmetrical, but like I said, it's completely up to you and your taste how you want yours to look. Again, make sure they're somewhat even in length towards the front here, so just measure them against each other. So obviously we then need to use these to make the branches. We'll then also add the beads, of course. So just add all the wires that you cut off along this one side of the curve. So now adding my wires, it's time to start adding the beads in. So you just want to pick out which ones you want to start with. Personally, I kind of like to start from the middle, but again, it's completely up to you. And then I like sometimes adding 3 branches together and sometimes 2, just again to make it not too symmetrical. But however you want them is your choice, personal preference. So I'm just going to take one wire at a time. Then I want to grab my tiny little beads and then see if I can find a hole and start adding the beads onto the wires here. So one, next one. So now I've got my first beads ready here. I don't like to add beads to more wires than what I'm using at a time because they might just fall off. But then I'm just going to wind these together to make sure exactly that they don't fall off while I make the rest of them. So I make sure all the beads are pushed up and I bring the bottoms together and then I start to twist them right below where the beads meet there. And just a few times to begin with, like I said, it's just to kind of seal them in place for now. Because we can always do a bit more. Because obviously, I'm kind of still working out how I want all the beads to go. So that's it for now. And then what I'm going to do is move on and say add beads to these two and then add beads to the rest as well until I've got the whole crown of the tree. So now I've got all my beads added here, it's time to start twisting these groups together to also make the trunk of the tree. So what I'm going to do is start with the 2 middle ones here. And then, same principle, you want to also just start twisting these together. Place them how you want them to kind of be attached together. And then again, start twisting them. And this is going to form the base of the trunk that we're going to add to them. Now obviously again, it's up to you what kind of style you want your tree to be. If you want it quite neat or if you want it quite organic. I like to kind of have some movement in mind. So it's not just straight down. Just get the other ones a little bit out of the way so they don't get in when I don't want them to. So moving further down and just I'm going to bring this in next. Just want to kind of gauge where I want this to feed into the trunk. So a little bit down here, so I think I just need to twist a couple more times in the middle here. I'm going to start then getting it going the other way as well. And then I'm going to just bring that and see. I think I want that to attach there, yeah? Just see if I have this long enough. Might just need to twist this once or twice more before I then bring that in. So again, I just the other one's out of the way. So I then bring this outer group into the middle as well, where I want it to sit, and then I keep twisting the middle together here Now a bit over towards the other side. And we can still just adjust it a bit after, but I want to get the base nicely in place how I want it to be. And then I want to see where I want the branch from the other side to attach. Probably something like that, so attach it in now. So bring that in. Sit exactly how you want. Just going to bring it around here. And then you just want to keep twisting and basically form the rest of the trunk until it reaches not all the way down to that bottom edge, but just a little bit of space between the bottom of the trunk and that edge, because we then also basically need to make the roots and also be able to finish off the ends of these tiny wires. So now I reached that point here. I've gotten to the point when you start making the roots. So what we need to do for that is start separating our wires out. What I'm going to do is end up with them back into pairs. So I'm going to be using 2 wires, take 2 that are pretty close to each other there. I'm going to then take them and start twisting them together. And that's going to start forming the first root. And this is over on this, towards this side here. So again, we need to then twist this enough so it reaches down to reach that outer frame. And of course, if you want to add a bit of organicness into it as well, you can add a bit extra length. But then you want to take another 2. So again, just work with pairs all the way across until you twisted all of these into the pairs and you have roots all the way along. So now get all the roots done here, then we need to attach them to that bottom part of the frame. So first of all, I just want to take 1 pair of wires at a time. I personally like to start with the middle ones. So I just want to separate the other ones out a little bit, get a bit of space here. Now the middle ones here, what I'm going to do is attach them around that middle flourish that we have in the weaving. So 1 wire is going to go down on one side, and it's also the wires going down between the 2 inner base wires, just like where we attached them on the top. So just straight down through and out of the back. Make sure we don't get any kink. That one down, and then the other one down on the other side of that same flourish. And also out to the back, and pull that through. There we go. And you can see you're going to pull that, and that little root there is going to sit and attach nicely to that bottom frame. Now obviously this is just coming through, so it's all loose. So what I'm going to do is, using 1 wire at a time, we need to wrap these wires around a few times. So I'm going to take, in this case I'm just taking the right one first of all, come up from the back there onto the same side of the root, and then we need to wrap this around that base wire a few times. So go down between the base wires again, and make another wrap right next to where we brought the wire down before. And we want to do this 2 to 3 times to make sure that this wire, when we cut it off, it's going to stay in place. So bring it through again. Make sure as we pull it we don't get any kinks. And then you can just leave it hanging for now. Then I'm going to take the other one that's on the left side, bring that through to the front from the back. And basically do the same thing. Go down. Make sure to do those few wraps around the base wire so we can attach it securely. Now this is then the middle one. When I feel like that's attached nicely, like I said, I'm just going to leave the tails for now because might as well just cut them all off at the same time. Just get this last one through. Straight through to the back. Then all you want to do is move on to the next one. So I will just take my next route, I'll just work my way outwards, doesn't matter what side you do it on, and then this one will go, these two wires will go on either side of that next flourish, so you still have some space between these two flourishes down here, which then will work for the right one, and then the left one will go on the other side of that flourish, and so on with the outer one, and of course the same thing on the other side as well. So keep doing this until you've attached all other wires from the roots. So now I got all the roots attached there. What I just like to do as well is take my chain nose pliers, just like I did with the rest of the tree, and just go in and actually have the roots exactly how I want it to be. So do any adjustments before we cut off the wires. Make it a little bit more organic here. And when you're then happy with it, then we can go in and cut off the excess. And we'll have our tree done. So I'm just going to go to the back here where all my wires are coming out. And I'm just going to do a few at a time. So start from one end. And then they're wrapping around this direction here. So coming out between those two base wires. So what I'm going to do is take my flush cutters and go right down where the wire is coming out from. And cut it close to where it's coming from, the base wires there. Then I take my chain nose pliers straight away. Because if you put your finger over it, you can feel a little end of the wire. Make sure you want to tuck that in. So flatten it down against the base wires. So obviously that's not going to catch or scratch any skin or clothes. Make sure to get rid of that. And then just move your way across. So I'm going to take these two wires because they're right next to each other, just cut them off together. And again, flatten them down until you make sure you can't feel them. So they're not going to catch, like I said. And then do that with the rest of them as well. So now I've completed my tree here, got rid of all the excess wires, and I've also attached my findings on the ends there to those wrapped loops that we made. All that's left to do really is shape the bracelet. So you can either shape it around something that has the size and shape you want it to have, like a bracelet mandrel, or you can just use your hands and fingers, but obviously gently. So I'm just going to use my hands and fingers. You just go into one place and start putting a curve into it. Obviously having the front facing outward and then the back of the bracelet be facing inward. And you want to do it gently, especially here around the tree. So just make sure you put a gentle curve. So don't go into one place and just do a big bend, that'll put it out of shape. The goal is to get the two ends here to meet up, so we can obviously use a clasp. So I'll go back and forth and gradually put that curve into it. And then the tree is going to end up sitting there on the front as well, so it's going to be the feature on the wrist. And the beads basically going around the sides. Just keep doing this until we have the shape. So once you then shaped it and you can use a clasp, then it's ready to wear. So these are the two different versions that I made here, so you can see you can really play around with different colours of beads and wire and get very different looks, but still using that same technique. And you can also make the style of the tree very personal depending on your taste. So this is the bracelet version of a Tree of Life design, and what I have already is several other tutorials of other Tree of Life designs as well. So what I'm going to actually do is make a playlist of all my Tree of Life designs, so you can make a full set if you want to, or if you just like the Tree of Life design. And I'm going to have a link to that playlist directly in the description box down below, so you can easily check that out. But otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this bracelet tutorial. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.